everybody, welcome back to another craft break. My name is Emma Panuski, and today I am going to share with you a really great kit that we have called our Folk Art Journal Kit. So art journaling is a big trend that we've seen recently. It really focuses a lot on mindfulness and inspiring yourself to be more creative, and it really focuses on your mental well-being, which I love. So we're going to talk a little bit about what is included in the kit, where you can find some great online free lessons that are associated with the kit, and then I'm going to do a little demo using our art journal kit. So make sure to stay tuned, we're going to have a lot of fun. So first things first, I'll briefly go over what is included in our art journal kit. So it has 12 colors of 2-ounce acrylic folk art paint. As you can see here, it's a really wide assortment of beautiful colors to choose from that will hopefully inspire you in your art journaling journey. It also comes with a 10-piece artist variety brush set and a Mod Podge squeegee and brayer tool. So I'll show you guys the art journal that Jessie Jennings made. So if you go to plaidonline.com and you search for art journal, you'll be able to see the kit in its entirety for you to pick up for yourself, and also our free online lessons. So let's take a look at the art journal that Jessie made in her lesson so you can see. Really vibrant and fun. She actually made this page with a lot of paint swiping techniques. So this really comes in handy if you've never seen this type of tool before. It is great for decoupage because you can use the brayer side, which is really a roller, to smooth out everything that you Mod Podge down to your surface, as well as the squeegee tool, where you can also smooth down any papers or ephemera that you include in your projects. But Jessie did something really cool here. She squirted little drops of paint all over her art journal and then used the squeegee to spread it out and get that really cool background. Here's another one that I love. One thing that I like to do whenever I'm creating an art journal page, and Jessie talks a lot about that too, is to focus on a specific color palette. If you look for like old retro magazines and newspapers and things like that, if you are kind of clued into a certain color or color palette, it makes it a lot easier to choose what you want to include in your project. Again, she has some pressed flowers, an old book that was beaten and torn, and she gave it a whole new life. So all of these pages you can see Jessie make with our art journal tutorials on plaidonline.com and our YouTube page. I love this little envelope to have something peeking out inside. So cute. A page of her favorite things, Dolly Parton of course, her dog Gus, sea turtles, betta fish. So yeah, I wanted to give you guys some tips about art journaling. Sometimes it's a little tricky to decide where to start. One thing for me that I like to do, there are a lot of great journal prompts if you just Google them, and a lot of times those journal prompts relate really well to art journals as well. So that's a great thing to look for if you're kind of stuck in a rut. Some of the things that I talked about just now, focusing on a color palette, focusing on a subject, which is kind of what we'll be doing today. I am going to focus on friendship. So I have this piece of watercolor paper. You don't necessarily need to have your very own art journal to get started. You could just have any type of heavy-duty paper like this, whether it be watercolor paper, mixed media paper, etc. So I have this. I have my art journal kit with all of the goodies that come in it, and I'll show you guys some other things as well. So like I just spoke about briefly, I love to look on Etsy and eBay for vintage magazines and newspapers. So we went through some retro ones, and we just gathered some really cool patterns, which are always nice to have. You can see this is an old children's book. And then I also did a little bit of research and I printed out some things that me and one of my best friends loves. So we both love music. This is one of our favorite songs. I thought that could be cool to incorporate in our page today. And then we're both Cancers under the astrology sign. So I have this moon here, a picture of us, and then we're going to do something cool with this retro TV. So let's go ahead and get started. Before we jump too much into it, Caitlin is in the studio with us, so if you have any questions or comments about our craft break today, make sure to list them in the comment section. Okay, so to get started, one thing that I like to do to keep my page looking really clean is I like to tape it off so that I have a certain parameter that I'm working in. So this is just painter's tape, and I'm going to tape it off about 1/3 of an inch from each side of my paper. That way, if I'm, coloring outside the lines, I can remove my tape at the end and it'll look really nice and clean. So the lessons on plaidonline.com and the kit is called our art journal kit, but it doesn't just end there. Like you see, we're crafting on a piece of watercolor paper. This is also a really great kit to pick up, and the lessons work really well with just individual pieces of art. If you want to work on a sheet of paper like this and then frame it, or give it as a gift to somebody, or even a really thoughtful, personalized card would be really special to do. Okay, so now that we're all taped off, I am going to break out some of my folk art paint and get started. So I'm focusing on friendship today, and I have one of my closest friends in mind. Her name is Jessie, and she really loves astronomy. So I'm going to paint a little kind of space galaxy scene in the background with our folk art paint. So to my palette, I'm going to add some cobalt hue, and not very traditional of a galaxy, but I thought it'd work really well with this paper that I pulled from a magazine. I'm going to also add some violet pansy. In my personal experience, the more creative you get with your art journaling and your collaging process, the cooler it looks in the end. So I'm not too worried about making it too realistic looking, is what I'll say. All right, so I'm going to take my cobalt hue and this 1-inch flat brush, which comes in our 10-piece Artist Variety brush set, and I'm going to go ahead and paint the top section of my watercolor paper with this blue color. Another good thing to remember, I find that it's important to use some pretty heavyweight paper for projects like this if you're going to be painting on them or Mod Podging on them, because if you have a less dense sheet of paper, sometimes the paper will crinkle and fold underneath, and you don't want that because then it'll ruin your beautiful art that you just made. And I'm not being too generous with the amount of paint that I have on here, just because it is paper. No matter how heavy duty you get your paper to be, you still want to be a little bit cautious and not put too much paint on it so that your paper doesn't buckle. So without rinsing my brush, I'm going to go ahead and take my violet pansy, this really vibrant, rich purple color, and start filling in the bottom section with our purple. And I'm not really worried about having a little bit of blue on my brush still, because eventually we're going to blend these two colors together. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to double load my brush. So on one end of my brush, I'm going to load it in my blue, and on the other end, I'm going to load it in my purple so that it looks something like this. And starting kind of where the two colors meet, I'm just going to really focus on this section until the colors are pretty seamlessly well combined. Repeat that process again if you need to blend it out a little bit more. Another thing that's really helpful is adding a little bit of water to your brush so that you get a really smooth blend there. Okay, so that is looking good to me. I'm gonna now rinse my brush. And next, I'm gonna add some wicker white to my palette. Just a little bit. I'll move this more in view. Okay, so what I'm going to do next, I'm going to take a medium flat brush. This is a number 10 flat. I'm going to dip it in my water. It's still pretty clean. I'm not worried about that color really transferring to my brush. Make sure it's nice and wet. And I'm going to start to slowly incorporate that watery brush, the water from the brush, into my wicker white, essentially watering down our paint. Make sure all of that watered down paint is off my brush. And now I'm going to take something that you may not have already in your craft room, a toothbrush. So we're about to do a technique called fly specking, and I'll show you how to do it. But we're going to take our toothbrush, and this has not been in my mouth, and it will never be again, just saying. This is just a crafting toothbrush now. I'm going to dip that into my watery white, make sure it's in all the bristles. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hold my thumb against the toothbrush, and I'm going to rake my finger down the bristles. And you see we get this really light, beautiful sequence of random dots, which looks like stars. So that is a cute little technique for you guys to use at home. Wipe my thumb clean. And now, before we get into our decoupage section of our project today, I'm going to use my multi-purpose heat tool to make sure that this paper is nice and dry before we move on. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set aside my sheet of paper, and I'm going to focus on the ephemera that I collected for my art journaling page. So ephemera is really just a fancy word for paper and stickers and dried flowers and anything that you can really decoupage into a piece of art. So I already showed you guys, I just love this page. Isn't it so beautiful? The wallpaper's beautiful. We're gonna do something fun with this mirror. I got this page from a children's book because my friend and I used to be roommates, and we saw a lot of wildlife actually out of the window of our apartment. So lots of deer, lots of birds, so I'm going to cut this out. Like I said, really funky patterns I always like to save because you never know when they'll come into good use. And then some pictures that I printed out. So I'm going to start by cutting out this deer. I also think it makes your art journal look more interesting if you have a bunch of different types of art. So if you have real photos, illustrations like this, more graphic pieces of art, I think the mix of all of those things together ends up looking really, really cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that mirror image, and a big technique that a lot of collagers use is they tear paper. So you get a really cool texture at the tear, and you can really create the shape that you want a little bit quicker than using scissors or a craft knife. So what I'm going to do is I want to make sure that I don't cut out my mirror, but I do want to have a kind of organic edge going on here. So I'm just going to tear that down. I don't really like this hard corner, so I'm going to tear that off as well. Like so. And then I'm going to tear again, not wanting to get my mirror right here. All right. So I have a little cutting mat right here that I'm going to bring into view. I'm going to place this down here, and I'm going to grab my craft knife, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace my craft knife along the edge of where the mirror hits the mirror's frame, and we're going to actually do a pretty cool technique. So just being careful, following the edge of my mirror. And we're not going to cut out the entire hole, but I just want to have a flap like this. So we can have some images coming through. Isn't that kind of cute? All right, so I am going to take a pencil actually and just kind of score where my deer falls off and trim him down. All right. Going back to our galaxy here. Now it's time to break out our Mod Podge. So like I said, our art journal comes with an 8-ounce bottle of Mod Podge matte. And I'll give you guys a little tip for Mod Podging. If you're going to do a lot of layering, to really kind of keep the process going, and so you don't have to wait for your project to dry before your next steps, which can always be a little bit annoying. So I like to use things like wax paper or parchment paper to actually Mod Podge my small shapes on, and I'll kind of show you guys what I mean by that. So I have my deer here. I'm going to flip him over. Put some Mod Podge on my palette really quick. So this is a wax coated palette paper, so this is also another great surface to do this technique on. Really, we want to do it on any surface where the Mod Podged paper doesn't stick to that surface. All right, so using that flat brush again, I am going to dip my brush in my Mod Podge and apply the Mod Podge to the back of my shape. Make sure you get all of the areas. And then again, we have our mirror here. Move this deer out of the way and do the same thing with our magazine page. Carefully going around that shape that we cut with our X-Acto knife. All right, looking good. So since there's a corner in our image here, I'm going to line up that corner with the corner that we taped off, making sure not to get over the tape. I did, so that's okay. That's the great thing about Mod Podge, is that you have a little bit of working time to kind of, you know, take it off and play around with it again before your paper totally dries. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that this section of my magazine is really nice and on there. Oh, I did it backwards, you guys, but that's the beauty of Mod Podge, like we keep talking about. We're going to do it the other way. You know what? Let me apply a little bit more Mod Podge, because you can do it a lot of times, but sometimes you do need to apply a little bit more Mod Podge, because now our Mod Podge is stuck on the galaxy, but that's all right. All right, so we're going to line it up again, hopefully for the last time, and we're going to focus on the left portion of our paper here. And then we'll put Bambi in, slide him in there, just like that. Cute. All right. All these little edges that dried while I was making some mistakes, we're just gonna put a little bit more Mod Podge in there. Perfect. All right, so another thing that I wanna show you guys, I have this picture of my friend and me and this retro TV. So I really, if you haven't noticed by my little mirror, I think it's cool to play around with like mirrors and TVs and like fish bowls, things like that, that you wouldn't expect to, let me re-say that. I like to place images in those with decoupage whenever I'm collaging, with images that you would not expect to find in those places. So what we're gonna do with this TV, I'm gonna cut out the screen and I'm gonna place it with a photo of my friend and me. Okay, so whenever I need to cut out the middle of a shape, here's a little tip for you guys at home. So I'm gonna fold it, but I'm not gonna crease it. And we wanna make sure that we're getting the center here. So now we have this little hole that we can stick a blade of our scissors through. And that way we don't have to cut around any unnecessary areas where we don't need to. Okay, so now what we're going to do is I'm just going to place this on here before we cut it out. So cute. And I'm just going to take my pencil so that I make sure that I don't overuse my scissors and cut out any spaces that I don't want to. So I'm just going to trim this up. It doesn't have to be perfect because our TV is going to be hiding most of this. All right, taking our art journaling page again, make sure that it's still where we want it to be. That's looking good. So I'm going to Mod Podge this right down in place there, and I'm going to add a little bit more Mod Podge to my palette. Applying it to the back of my image. Then starting here. And while I'm doing that, I'll actually show you a squeegee tool in use. So I like to start from the middle and brush outwards. Just like that. And that way, every single time you get a really crisp image where your paper is totally flush to your surface. Now I'm going to Mod Podge the back of my TV. And then go ahead and stick that right over. Whoop. Again, making sure that I don't Mod Podge over my tape, because we want to have one nice clean release when we take our tape off. Just using my fingers to make sure it's nice and smooth. All right, I'm really liking how this is looking so far. Couple last things I want to do to wrap it up. I have some sheet music here. This is one of our favorite songs. Whenever I am tearing paper like this, I just want to go ahead and trim the image so that when I do tear it, I only am left with something that I would actually want to include in my project. So I'm just trimming away all of that white space because I don't really want to include any of that in my project. And sometimes, you know, tearing paper isn't the most predictable thing to do, so I am just wanting to be sure that I am left with only things that I want. Actually, I'm going to put this down here and layer it over my. So I have my pencil and I'm just marking where the tape ends so that I know where to cut to get a really sharp line, or sharp corner rather. Mod Podge to the back of this. And then line it up. Make sure it's not on top of our tape. Smooth it out. Okay. And one last thing before I let you all go, I am going to cut out this little moon. Like I said, my friend Jessie is really into space and astronomy, and we are also both Cancers, born in July, so our ruling planet is the moon. So whenever you're like collaging for somebody, I think it's special and thoughtful to include things that you both have in common, as well as, you know, memories you shared, individual interests between the two of you. It makes projects like this go a long way, in my opinion. So I have my moon one more time. I'm going to flip it over, apply some Mod Podge to the back. And then I'm going to place it in the top left corner. Okay, so there's one thing left to do. I know you're all dying to see it. Now we're going to remove our tape, so we get those crispy edges. Oops, I'm bringing the palette paper with me. And one more. So now we have a really cute, personalized, thoughtful art journaling page. So like I said, if you were inspired by anything that we talked about today, make sure to go to plaidonline.com, check out our art journaling kit. We have lots of online education that goes hand in hand with our art journal kit, led by Jessie Jennings, who is a really great instructor. She walks you through a bunch of tips and tricks, ways to get started in your art journaling journey, and all of those good things. So make sure to go to plaidonline.com to check it out. Thank you guys